on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our webinar, CDP Scoring Essentials. This is part one of a two-part series. So if you're not registered for the next one, we'll go into how you can do that soon. But today we're going to talk about what drives scores and how to strengthen them. I have with me my colleagues Josh and Caesar. They are our CDP experts in-house, and we'll be kind of talking through the different CDP scoring essentials today. I'll let them introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll go into a bit of background info. Josh, you want to get us started?
Sure. Thanks, Preston. Thank you all for joining us. As Preston said, my name is Josh Knupp. I'm a senior manager here at 3R Sustainability. I'm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Support companies with a variety of assessments, including CDP. So hopefully can share some insights for you today. Caesar?
Thank you so much, Josh. And hello, everybody. My name is Cesar Carreño. I am Associate Director for European Operations. I have been working in climate and sustainability for around 18 years now and supporting everything related to CDP disclosure, climate change, CSRD, ESRD, so forth and so on. Very happy to participate and support in this webinar.
Go to the next slide. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with 3R, we're a full-service sustainability consulting firm that supports clients in a variety of industries with anything and everything related to sustainability pretty much. We're a one-stop shop, and we can support with your CDP submission and kind of everything that goes into that as well. So anything related to greenhouse gas inventories, climate risk assessments, sustainability management systems for understanding your sustainability risks and opportunities related to climate. Also things like product and packaging sustainability and sustainable procurement. So really anything and everything related to sustainability, like I said. We're a proud women-owned business and B Corp, and we also support a lot of folks with the EcoVadis assessment. So if you're getting both the CDP and EcoVadis requests, we're definitely very well suited to support you. Yeah, we can move on to, I think, our first poll. Get that launched. We're curious about the audience. What industry are you from? If you could fill this out. There wasn't an ability to do other. We were running out of spots. So if you're not in this, you could put in the chat what industry you're from. Okay, it looks like a lot of manufacturing, construction, industrial. I'd say most of my clients fit into that space, and also in healthcare and consumer goods. So we're in good company here. Okay, we got about 70% voted. I'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, so about 50% from industrial, and the rest is kind of scattered throughout. I will share the results real quick. Thanks for the participation. Most of you did the poll. And great, we can move along to talk about the webinar series and then quick second poll after that, so be ready. Our upcoming webinar series, we have one in just a week or so about packaging compliance. So if any of you are being tasked with things like EPR, we're going to do a webinar reviewing any updates. And then, like I said, the second part of the CDP series is really going to be after the questionnaire is released and understanding what has changed and how that might impact how you manage the questionnaire this year. So those QR codes should put us to the newsletter if you're wanting to sign up. I think if you're registered today, you're probably going to auto-enroll into that series. But if you're not, you can sign on to those or message us with any questions. All right, and with that, I think we got poll number 2. This is going to help us really speak to the audience. Have you reported to CDP before? Is this anyone's first time submission? Oh yeah, okay. Wow, this is interesting. Half and half.
Yes.
Half yes, half no.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm curious in the chat if anyone wants to share um, where these kind of requests are coming from. Are they new customers? Are they new expansions for your business? Wow, it's really still 50-50. This is interesting. I'm glad we asked this poll. Okay, while I let the rest of the poll play out, I also wanted to mention the Q&A feature. So at the end of this, we will be using the Q&A. In my screen, it's the top right-hand corner. There's a little question box. You can put your questions in there, and these guys will answer at the end. Or if there's any questions throughout, it might make sense to stop them. But please use this. This is a really lovely resource to have these consultants here today that deeply know the assessment and are deeply experienced. So please use that Q&A feature. All right, with 90% of people voting, we have more people that said no than yes. I'm very surprised by this. What do you think, guys? Is that surprising to you?
Well, disclosure is certainly a hot topic these days regarding transparency and communication with shareholders and stakeholders. So I believe, yeah, it's a good sample of the market as it is.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think I got one last slide, just kind of going through today's focus. Thanks for hanging with me as we go through the background of this. We're going to go through the CDP scoring fundamentals and the essential criteria, what that means. And then we'll round it out with some real practical improvements on how to improve your score and how to approach this assessment. And then again, we'll have Q&A, so please utilize this time. We like to have more engaging sessions, and audience participation is one way to do that. So thanks for participating in the poll so far, and I will hand it along. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. So this is a very brief intro and slide on what has been the evolution of CDP through the past 5 years. For those which have already reported, you will see that the evolution, of course, does not come without complexities. No? There has been increase in the number of questions. There have been changes on how the modules have been presented. They have been merged, and so forth and so on. I have generated this table. I won't go through all of it. It's there so you can see it once we distribute the material. But as you can see, in 2021, there were around 115 questions with a baseline structure, one integrated pillar on climate, one integrated pillar on water, one integrated climate on forest, all of them self-contained, but differentiated. And there was one model for the supply chain as well. But this started to change. The number of questions started to increase in 2022, 130 questions with around 25 new questions. They remove around 12 questions. They started to expand the topics, for instance, biodiversity, the RE 100% program related metrics, for and so on. No? In 2023, pretty similar model on the questionnaire and implementation, but then started to align more and more to science-based targets, 1.5 pathway matching and tracking, analyzing this type of metrics. The scoring methodology started to be reviewed, but in 2024, it shifted to integrate one a specific questionnaire, which all of the three modules within it, including the supply chain mode, including the biodiversity questionnaire, and included the one for plastics and microplastics as well. No, so all of these questions were consolidated in one specific long questionnaire where you needed to choose the type of questions that you wanted to answer, and of course expanded the essential criteria to every disclosure from every other score besides A-listers. No, this had some impact here and there because whoever disclosed was not properly informed, didn't have all of the information at hand, didn't take it that serious, and this, of course, has a very sensible impact. But again, in 2025, this remains stable. Disclosure started to understand what was the main purpose of the essential criteria. There were minimal changes. One of the biggest complaints was about understanding the scoring methodology, adding more detail about the description on how to answer the questions, adding more detail about why that question was here, so forth and so on. No? So you will be able to read this table once we distribute the material to you. But the idea is for you to understand that CDP is not static, it's constantly evolving. They will announce a new version of the questionnaire towards the end of April, and we expect to have some minor changes here and there. But then important to highlight that the essential criteria is here to stay. This being said, please feel free to add any question that you wish to have answered towards the end of this presentation on the Q&A box. This being said, I'll give the floor to Joshua for the next slide.
Thanks, Cesar. And then just one quick plug for our future webinar. In about a month, we'll have a webinar dedicated to the 2026 changes for CDP. So you could think of that as an extension of this table coming up soon. So for the next portion of this webinar, we're going to dive into the scoring fundamentals. There is a lot of information here, so we really try to boil it down into the most important points. Keep it practical, give you some examples on how you can be referencing the scoring fundamentals and guidelines and the like. So as this group may be aware, there are 4 environmental themes for CDP. The 4th one you'll see on the far right there is new. Ocean is in 2026, but climate change, water security, and forests. For the purposes of today's session, we're really going to be focusing in on climate change. This is the most mature, most widely used, most widely responded to portion of it. So that'll really be our focus for the rest of this presentation. Again, getting into the fundamentals, the key areas that CDP climate is really looking at when assessing the maturity of your program is the governance. So who is overseeing your climate risk, your climate management, your environmental risks, a bit broader. That's the governance. The second is risk and opportunity, disclosure, and management. So have you identified what your risks are and what are you doing to mitigate those risks? And flip side, what is similar with the opportunities? Then business strategy and transition plan. We'll talk quite a bit about the transition plan. That's kind of a thread you'll see throughout the webinar today. Using that as an example, that's a key component. Emissions, so greenhouse gas reporting is a fundamental part of CDP. And then lastly, targets and performance. So do you have any targets set and how are you tracking towards meeting those targets, specifically for greenhouse gas emissions, but there are also some other opportunities as well. So the breakdown, when you're looking at CDP, you'll see this stairs figure quite a bit. And we'll talk a little bit more later about why this is the structure. You can see going from the top to bottom, leadership, management, awareness, disclosure. These are the different thresholds of scoring for CDP. Disclosure you could think of as, are you completing the questionnaire? Are you not leaving any questions blank? That type of thing. Are you being transparent with where you're at, with the maturity of your program? And then working your way up to leadership. This is really a leader in the industry, doing a lot to manage climate risk, have transition plans in place, have targets, are reporting their greenhouse gas emissions, and meeting the essential criteria, which Cesar will be talking about quite a bit later. One reason you commonly see that step visual that I showed on that last slide is because of this idea of a gating effect or being gated towards to the next threshold in scoring. So this is an important distinction that I'm not sure all submitters are aware of, but the way the CDP scoring works is you need to reach a certain point percentage of the kind of lower on the steps. So at the disclosure level, at the awareness level, you need to make sure you're meeting specific criteria there before you're eligible for the next threshold. You see some notes here on the left about that, and then just a kind of a quick point here about how this works. So go to the right side when you're looking at the level, the point percentage, and then the scoring band. So The foundation of CDP scoring is based on points. Each question is allocated a point value. It can vary on what that point value is. But when they're looking at scoring at the macro level, it's about the point percentage for each of the levels. So say you're going through the assessment, you've met you've exceeded the 49% of the point percentage in the disclosure level. So you have a check mark there. You continue moving through, again, at the disclosure level, you have over 79% of the points at this level, which makes you eligible to go into awareness. So to continue that thread, say you have 60% of the awareness points allocated, but then you're going and you don't exceed this threshold. Say you're at 55% of the points for awareness. This means your score is essentially stopped. It's capped at a score of C. At that point, even if you have strong percentages in management and leadership, because you don't exceed this threshold, you are capped at that score there. So as noted by this point at the bottom, many companies, they're not losing points necessarily at the leadership level. They don't have the opportunity to get to that leadership level because you may have been stuck at awareness. So what this means for you is when you're completing the assessment, you want to make sure you're starting from the ground up. And that's one of the key recommendations that I have for you later on, is make sure that you're meeting the disclosure requirements. Make sure you're meeting the awareness requirements. If your goal is to get to an A, you need to make sure that you have all of the earlier steps on that, on those stairs met. Okay, so then to get into how are points actually awarded? We talked about points quite a bit in that last one. I want to make sure that we recognize or share how you get those points. So we're going to go through an example. This is question 5.2, specifically on climate transition plans. So I'll walk through each of those scoring bands, scoring thresholds, and just point out a few notes that I have for you. So here, this is the disclosure scoring criteria. You can see it is based out of 3 points, and it is whether you've completed the cells or not. Have you entered information? It's as simple as that. Have you entered information into the questions? So just by entering the information, you can get the maximum amount of points there. Again, disclosure, easiest threshold to meet. And then once you've met that disclosure threshold, you can go into the awareness component of it. Something to note here is that you must have full disclosure points to be eligible for that awareness. So I think this demonstrates that step and what I was sharing on that last slide. And then something of note, when you're looking at the scoring methodology, there are opportunities for partial points. So when you're considering your responses, when you're considering your program, this may be one input into that. Of course, you want to consider the return on investment, the risk management from your business, but also the point consideration is one to keep in mind. So just want to note that even if you're not doing something right now, but you are committed to doing it in the future, there are opportunities throughout the assessment to say you plan on doing it in the next 2 years and you can get partial credit. So moving on to that third threshold, the management. I don't have anything specifically highlighted here. Again, you're going to see the full awareness points must be awarded to be eligible for this one. So again, that's stepping threshold. And then moving into leadership. So a few key points I want to note here. One is there are 2 routes. So you'll see this in a lot of the questions in CDP. There are different scoring routes. So be aware of your options there is the main point. And then one other thing I wanted to note is just how common it is for CDP to reference other questions when you're completing a certain question. So we're looking at 5.2 here, but you can see all the references to 4.1, 5.4. a lot of different references. So just keep that in mind as you're going through the assessment. Is there your score may be impacted based on other questions. So with that, I will hand it over to Cesar to talk about the essential criteria, and then you'll hear back from me here in a few minutes.
I muted. Thank you so much, Josh. Great explanation. So we are tapping into essential criteria. Some of you may have already encountered the essential criteria, may have heard those with these, may have learned how to move or to mobilize within the essential criteria to secure scoring. But the most important part for us, at least, is to share for everybody who has observed these barriers, does not understand how to overcome them, and for those which are reporting for the very first time to be informed about what to do, about what they're going to encounter in this process. No, so the essential criteria, just like Josh mentioned, is mostly like a gatekeeping a process that, of course, demands a little bit more ambition into the disclosure process, and it applies minimum requirements across all of the scoring levels. Just like we can observe here with the icons, we have a board oversight of the climate. This means allocate roles and responsibilities, understand why these roles and responsibilities were allocated, which skills are needed to be part of this board, if there are periodic meetings of this board to discuss specific topics, so forth and so on. No? The implementation of transition plans, which are aligned to the 1.5-degree scenario, not only aligned, but also being made public available with monitoring systems in place, so forth and so on. So a very ambitious process. On top of that, disclosure of scopes 1, 2, and 3. Not only to disclose the totals, but also there are other specific tables at hand. For instance, to break down your scope 1 emissions according to business units, to type of products, to locations, so forth and so on. No? And then setting a science-based targets, which is considered the gold standard towards the fight against climate change, because has very specific milestones and timeline for this process, with a public available commitment through the Science-Based Target Initiative and Secretariat. This can be either validated or not, or in the process of being validated. And of course, the last point, particularly in the climate change realm, is the verification of your emissions, additional verification of your sustainability report and transition plans, so forth and so on. What does verification means? It needs to be done through any of the accepted verification and quality assurance standards, which are listed on the CDP website. Important to highlight that one of the most common used is ISO 40064, but there are other available on the website and listed there. No, so all of these elements needs to be in place because they respond to different opportunities to move towards the next scoring process as well. Again, it does not matter if your questionnaire has been 85% completed. The essential criteria is a yes or no question. That element needs to be there for you to be able to mobilize into the next scoring criteria. No. Again, please feel free to write your questions on the Q&A chat, which you have on top right, if I'm not mistaken. Josh and me will be very happy to answer these questions towards the end of the session. Can you share the next slide, please? Yeah, Josh. Okay, so for those of you which are first timers and for those of you which have reported to CDP before, there are two ways that you can spot the essential criteria in advance before submission. We always recommend that either you or any third party which is supporting you in this process, like a consultancy in this case, you need to be able to identify the essential criteria in order to prevent to have misalignment or to avoid and minimize risks. No, there are two ways that you can do this. You can always check the CDP guidance, which is one specific document published by CDP, where all of the essential criteria questions are marked as easy essential criteria. No, or is described with additional information and context. For instance, these specific questions must be met to achieve X score level. No. As a good example, you can observe here that to achieve minimum level, the following essential criteria must be met. You might find this text in the guidance. And then, of course, you will find the specific questions which are marked according to the specific model. For example, C 6.1, C 4.1, etc., etc. These are listed. It's yes, the CDP guidance might be big and complex, but once you understand how it works, it will be easier to look for it. Not you just do a find run through the document, and you can start spotting the essential criteria. And there is a specific section about essential criteria. That's one way. The other way to do it is you check the scoring methodology, which is another document that you might be able to download. And this is very specific according to the modules, either climate, water, or forest. No, and then again, you will need to search for the essential criteria, EC, etc., etc. And I suggest for you to create a checklist of the questions according to the nomenclature on how hard they've been identified. In this case, C6.1, C1.1, C4.1. If you see C, it's climate change by default, but you need to identify how are they connected. You need to be careful because some of these questions, depending on your answer, open additional questions. No, so you need to be very careful not to miss which fields are mandatory for this process or not, and also to avoid different information among related questions. No, there are a couple of cases that I can definitely showcase in the modules, in the slides to come. But once again, yes, this is the best way to do so. Identify your essential criteria first, and then prepare to respond it. Moreover, if you have identified your essential criteria, you can, by default, understand what could be your possible scoring, because this is, again, a gatekeeping scoring question. And next slide, please, Josh. Thank you so much. Okay, so you can see here how your essential criteria impact your score. There is a very nice example that we have prepared. As you can see, mark essential criteria, climate change, module 7. So this is regarding transition plans. So to meet leadership level, this means A-level requirements, CDP expects a climate transition plan aligned with 1.5 degrees, public available, which includes a mechanism to track progress. So you may see it as a very complex space because you might have a climate transition plan, but is, for instance, well below 2 degrees. That is not accepted by CDP. It needs to be aligned with 1.5 degrees. What does public available means? That has been made publicly available to different stakeholders, not specifically to shareholders, but any third party that wishes to take a look into this plan, available through a link through your website, embedded in your sustainability report, or through any other means. And not only that, which includes a mechanism to track progress. This is also linked to the implementation of an MRV system, which is monitoring, reporting, and verification. So these provide clear instructions on how are you going to monitor progress. How often are you going to measure your emissions? How are you going to secure quality? Which stakeholders are involved? If you have any specific intermediary goal besides your milestones, for instance, between now and 2030, is it a yearly metric that you're going to do? How you're going to measure? How are you going to store the data? Are you going to store it in your own internal systems? Maybe you have a huge Excel or a Power BI tool, or you use a software-based tool, or you use a web-based tool, so forth and so on. And not only that, you need to secure that there is the capability to allow third parties to follow up this progress clearly. Not only that, it must meet the scoring requirements, which are also tapped in question 5.2, which is linked to these direct questions. Just like I mentioned, there are questions that are linked with one to the other. And a good example, for instance, is when you report your emissions. When you report your emissions, you might report the totals of scope 1, but in addition, you also need to report your scope 1 broken down according to business units, geographic locations, production lines, so forth and so on. And the number must be, the difference must be no more or less than 5%. That's the materiality, the deviation which is accepted. So as a good example of this. So without all of these components, you will never move forward to A level. You will always be capable B. It does not matter what percentage of the questionnaire you have answered already. This is very important for you to understand because it will save you a lot of headaches. Some companies have decided to pursue a complaint about the scoring, but then again, they become very frustrated because CDP is very clear about what they state on how the essential criteria is implemented. Yeah, the next slide, please, Josh.
Cesar, if it's okay with you, I'm actually going to jump ahead to, I
Yeah,
think we've
sure.
covered this one for the most part. I see we only have about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we can get into the Q&A here.
Sure.
So just skip ahead of that one.
Yeah, sure. Just very quickly on this one, just like I was mentioning, how do you need to complete the essential criteria questions? For instance, this is one quick example, the question C 6.1, which is the gross global scope 1 emissions. As you know, the GHG protocol tells you need to report your scope 1 emissions, one single number. But then again, there is an essential criteria questions, the climate change questionnaire. What is non-compliant is, for instance, we estimate that not compliant. No methodology, no breakdown on the different tables, and no explanation about the boundaries. So all of these elements needs to be in place so you are compliant with the essential criteria. The fact that there is an answer does not mean that you're complying. It needs to be the right answer according to the context of what CDP requires. I think we can quickly move to the next one, and then you can take over yours. So what to avoid? Very quickly. Always avoid not reported, not doing it, selecting not or no or unknown without other detail on descriptions, leaving justifications fields empty, no data, which is specifically quantitative information, no context, which is qualitative information, and mismatching information or data, for instance, that your emissions match across all of the related questions. Remember, does not need to match 100%. CDP gives a threshold of plus minus 5%. That is acceptable according to their criteria, but make sure that it matches and you're using the correct units. Yeah, that's pretty much everything on my end, Josh, I think.
Great. Thanks so much, Cesar. So diving into some recommendations for how to improve your score. So as Cesar was mentioning, many of those recommendations are going to have carryover throughout the entirety of the assessment, not just specific to the essential criteria. I'm glad he called it out there as a specific opportunity, but you're going to see that here as well. So how to improve your score, kind of 3 areas. So focus on what drives your score. The essential criteria certainly is a big component of that. Focus on that first, and then other high impact areas. So you've probably seen throughout this presentation, we've really kind of hammered home on a few of those most important areas. So you can see that governance, emissions targets, and transition plans, really critical to getting a top score. So be sure to focus on those. The recommendation from earlier, build from the ground up. Really make sure that you're meeting all of those disclosure requirements, then the awareness requirements, all the way up through leadership. Want to make sure that you're not missing any points at that lower threshold that's preventing you from getting to your scoring goals. And then this third point here about alignment across sections, Cesar touched on it a bit there, but you want to make sure that you have a consistent story that's kind of throughout the assessment, where you're identifying the risk, you're sharing how you're managing the risks, what's the data associated with that, and then what are the targets for it. So you could think of it really as a management system as you work your way through the CDP assessment. I think it's intentionally set up that way for you to really manage risks in a lot of ways, what it comes down to. And then essential criteria. I won't go into that any further, but make sure you're closing those points. So what do high scoring companies do differently? So some key principles on the left side there, providing that clear rationale, how, why decisions are made is really critical. Explaining, having strong explanations. So rather than just saying something is not applicable, give some specifics as to why it's not a material topic or why you don't have a piece of information or data. Be as specific as you can. And then use timelines. So mentioned earlier about how you can have kind of partial credit if you have plans to implement something. I think that's just one example of using timelines, but if you're implementing a new program and you have goals take the next phase in a couple of years, be sure to outline what that looks like in CDP. That's only going to help your score, only going to help your overall assessment. But on the right side here, just some further examples of what a weak response would be versus a strong response. So keep these in mind as you're completing the assessment and preparing for it. Okay. And then this one is really quite simple, but I like to include it because I think there are a lot of good resources out there that CDP itself is providing. So there is the essential criteria reference document that you have access to, so you can see all the different essential criteria questions. And then the additional information buttons. We have a screenshot of it here on the right. So for all of the questions, you have this little book. You could press on that. You get clarification on the question. You get definitions and what the expectations are from CDP. And then really noteworthy, you have the scoring methodology for every question. You can see how many points allocated, how you achieve certain point thresholds. And that's for each of the disclosure awareness leadership. So you can see at each step what you need to have in place to meet the expectations there. So to close out with some key takeaways, CDP is really structured in its scoring, disclosure, awareness, management, leadership, as we talked about quite a bit. Make sure that you're meeting all of those foundational elements. Without that, you may be capped at a certain score. Be sure to complete the assessment in its entirety. Missing questions is the biggest way to lose out on points. Not responding is really detrimental to your score, and it is an easy kind of quick win to address. Essential criteria, talked about that. Make sure that's a top of mind, and the other high impact areas, which are very directly connected to the essential criteria, are noted there at the bottom. So then, wrapping things up here, just to give you a sense of the timeline, if you haven't seen this before, this is on the CDP website, but the new questionnaire and guidance will be published on April 20th. April 20th, April 27th. The response window actually opens June 15th with a scoring deadline of September 14th. So those are the ones I'd like to highlight, and then you'll get your scores back the week of November 30th. And then last slide before we dive into some questions, and I'll leave this up here for a second, but we are offering for the attendees today a complimentary CDP consultation. So if you have any questions specifically about your program, about your past assessments or your first assessment, feel free to scan the QR code, send me an email, and we're happy to get a meeting set up with you to talk through your options and some pain points that you may have had in the past. So I'll leave this up, and then Preston, I'll hand it back to you if there's any questions that have come through. Happy to answer those in the remaining time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And just want to reiterate this opportunity. It's really nice to be able to speak to someone and just ask some questions. CDP itself is overwhelmed and, can't keep up with all the customer support emails and stuff. So we're happy to act as that resource and either, like Josh said, go through your old questionnaire or talk through what you're struggling with as you prepare for this year. Or it seems like half of you haven't done it yet, so as you kind of prepare to see it for the first time. Not too many questions, so keep them coming. We had one asking about ISO 14064. Does the inventory just need to follow the process, or does it actually need to be audited against ISO 14064? Oh, Caesar, sorry, I think you're muted.
Sorry. So normally the verification statement is needed for you to score points on that specific question, but then again, external statements for pre-assurance, that means internal verifications, are not accepted. It needs to be external verification assurance. And it's not only ISO, there are other standards are well accepted. For example, ISAE, ASAE 3000, in the Netherlands, where I'm located, is the Dutch standard, which is 3000A, etc., etc. There are different standards, but yes, ISO is one of the most recognized, and is cross programs as well. So yeah.
Great. And I'll use that moment to shout out our sister company, Sustainability Assurance Services. They provide third-party data validation and assurance for sustainability data. So if you're needing someone that can take the intimidation out of assurance, our friends at SAS can help you. And you can contact us for connection with them. Okay, we have another question. Do you have any certification recommendations for someone looking to get into ESG reporting?
Well, that depends. If it's a person that wishes to start developing and implementing the GHG emissions reporting, there are very specific programs outside, for instance, from the GHG Institute, which is one that I did. And they also provide verification training under ISO 14064. But then again, all of them are following the GHG protocol, which is the Bible for this process, unless you are in France, which they use bilan carbon, which is different.
All right. Keep your questions coming. Okay, Josh, yeah?
Yeah, I wanted to know if you're thinking about reporting from a sustainability report, more of a narrative with data intertwined. One of the standards that we commonly see in assurance standards is AA 1000. So if you have a sustainability report, that is one option for you to have the entirety of your report and the process assured. So another one to look into.
Yeah, great recommendation. And I'll kind of mention too, when we're working with clients on kind of a variety of reporting things, it's nice to think about what CDP asks for when you're collecting data for your sustainability report in general. So kind of collecting all that information at once is really nice, and then you have it in the report, and it's a bit easier to get that information into the CDP portal when it's all organized ahead of time. So that's definitely a recommendation we have in terms of processing, and working with someone like 3R can be useful in kind of making sure you have all the coverage of that information. It's hard to keep track. There's a lot of questions. I exported a CDP report the other day, which includes all the questions as well, but I think it was a 200-page Word document. So definitely a heavy lift if you're doing it for the first time. It's nice to have someone kind of managing the process and doing a bit of hand-holding.
Yeah, I think I'll add that you want to be strategic about your data collection and information collection. As Preston alluded to, there are a lot of stakeholders, a lot of different assessments, a lot of voluntary, a lot of mandatory reporting out there in the sustainability space. So you want to make sure that you're being strategic and proactive with what you're tracking and how you're tracking it. Make sure that it makes sense for your business. And yeah, I'll just leave it there. Makes sense for your business.
Okay, in our final moments, I wanted to launch our last poll. Kind of knowing what you have learned today, knowing what you know about CDP, is there any level of support you're needing help with or wanting us to kind of reach out about or not? What are you focusing on in the next few months as you prepare for this disclosure? In the meantime, too, I'll just mention we're going to have a survey that I think will be emailed to all of you that are joining today. We'd really appreciate it if you took, it's like 3-question survey just to get a bit of feedback, and you're able to put some suggestions for upcoming webinars, so we can include that content in part 2 of this webinar series or future events. Okay, looks like most people are looking for kind of adjunct support with things like climate risk or policies, inventory.
Also important to highlight that, yes, we can support either preparing your submission or reviewing a submission that you have prepared in advance to secure that all of your answers are aligned to what CDP requires. So the team in-house at 3R Sustainability, we have deep expertise on this specific topic. So feel free
Yeah.
to share with us how can we support you.
Yeah, it's a great point. We have a lot of clients that, you know, they have that confidence, but just the extra level of review gives their leadership team some confidence as well. Okay, I want to respect everyone's time. I'll end this poll and just say thank you again for joining today. Here's the contact information for 3R and SAS. I mentioned that third-party data verification and assurance. And please complete our survey. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.